Good morning, Dean Eric.
Good morning.
Thank you for participating in the St. Louis Press Club's Hour in the Now series. So today is August 7, 2020. First, introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm Eric Rothenbuhler, Dean of the School of Communications at Webster University.
And I know you pretty well because I kind of work for you.
That's
so
right.
It gives me a little flavor for to talk about what I know and what I perceive and what I observe. So I appreciate your time, really.
Right.
So how are you feeling with regard to, getting new season started?
I'm feeling excited. It's energizing. There's more than enough to worry about, but it's good to have a project. It's a important challenge. We're living through historical events, and so it's an opportunity to be a leader, and it's an opportunity to make a difference. I lived and worked in New York City in 9/11, and 9/11 wasn't one day in New York, it was 2 or 3 years experience. And so yeah, these moments, they're special moments, and we need to rise to the challenge, and we need to work together, we need to hang together, we need to stick together, support each other while we're doing, in our case, what we need to do for our students, for our classes, for the university, and for the larger community.
Can you speak to some of the measures now that classes will resume? I think it's important to hear the extraordinary measures that have been taken to elevate the students' experience, faculty, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I would say, let me answer that in two ways or two parts. One is if we go back to last March when we were told by the county that we had to go remote, we had to leave campus. We did a lot of work to replace the physical presence on campus and the face-to-face presence here in a building, in a shared workspace, with as much communication as possible. And so, we used social media. We held meetings more often. Of course, the meetings were by video, but we started having staff meetings, more frequent faculty meetings, lots of activities for students so that they still felt engaged and still felt part of a school. It wasn't just their classes, right? The whole schedule could disaggregate, and it just becomes a bunch of individual classes. In order for them to feel like a community and feel like they're members of a school, we needed other activities outside those classes. And that normally happens in a very informal, very natural way in a building that we all share. But without that building and without that opportunity to share that experience together on campus, we had to be very self-conscious in how we used communication technologies and media to stay in touch with each other, to remain present and visible for each other. Mm-hmm. So that's a kind of background condition. Now, this fall, as we're preparing to have students back on campus, we need to overlay that with very extensive safety measures. The virus is very much with us. We've got a significant rate of community transmission, but we know a lot more about the virus now than we did back in March. We know how it's transmitted. We know what are the high-risk activities and what are the low-risk activities. And so there's a long list of measures. Everybody at the university has been working all summer to prepare to have students back on campus in a safe way this fall. I can go through those all in detail, but maybe it'd be a good time to pause and let you ask another question.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the equipment, use of equipment, which is very much a part of the landscape at a school of communications. So, why don't we hit on that a little bit, and you can elaborate, please.
Yeah, with a large audio production program, a film and television video production program, animation, game design, journalism, advertising. We have a lot of classes that are media production classes where students are making things. They're producing media in the class. And so those classes are very dependent on equipment and facilities that are only available here in the building. So it was a serious hardship to go completely remote last spring. And it's important that we be able to have students back on campus and that we provide them access to that equipment and facilities and that experiential learning of working together, producing media, but how to do that safely. So we have spent all summer measuring all of our teaching and learning spaces, rearranging furniture, establishing new, much lower safe maximum occupancy rates for every room in the building. We've spaced chairs and computer workstations out 6 or more feet apart from each other. We've removed all the extra chairs. Where chairs can't be removed, we put "do not sit here" stickers on them. We've taped things off. We've got signs all over the building reminding students of safe and reminding ourselves of safe behaviors. What are the right things to do? There are hand sanitizer dispensers all around the building at every entrance and exit. There are sanitizing wipes in every classroom. Doors will be locked and staffed, and everybody, faculty, students, staff, and visitors, need to do a daily health check. You go online, you report your daily health status, and you get an email that says you have permission or you do not have permission to come to campus. You have to show that email at the door. You show your ID, and you're in the building, and you have to be wearing a mask, and then you're allowed in the building. So we'll be wearing masks at all time. We will be distant from each other at all time. We'll be practicing safe behaviors. And of course, faculty and staff will be walking through the building and helping kind of enforce community codes of conduct, right? A community has to take care of itself. Overnight, there will be a whole nother variety of sanitizing activities taking place overnight to sanitize equipment and rooms. Checkout equipment, right? Students check equipment out of our equipment pool, out of our media center, and take the equipment out to do production work, cameras, microphones, lights, and so on. That will be by appointment only now, just like curbside service at a restaurant. You have to call in advance and reserve your equipment. You'll have an appointment for when you pick it up. Be one student at a time coming in to get equipment. That equipment then we've got a deep enough pool that we can let equipment sit unused for 2 or 3 days between each use, and that gives us time to sanitize it as well as time just for any remaining viruses to die, because they don't live forever outside of a mammal's body. So lots and lots of practices to keep things safe. And of course, we have to be ready for reality, where we are part of a community in which there's community transmission of the virus. And so there will be some amongst us who contact the virus. And so there's a whole nother set of procedures for what to do, when someone is confirmed to have the virus, for contact tracing and for shutting down and disinfecting any workspaces or classrooms where that person was in the last few days.
A wonderful explanation. I was wondering about the effect on storytelling with measures.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so it's a very interesting thing. And there's no doubt we're living through a historical moment. The coronavirus is this may not be the biggest thing in everybody's life, but it's a very big thing in everybody's life. And it requires us to modify so much of our everyday behavior, requires us to behave in what would normally be unsocial ways, right? Keep your distance, no handshaking, no hugging, no sharing food, no gathering in groups. We have to wear masks, which hide our smiles. It's a very unsocial thing, and there is no doubt that that will show up in the stories that students tell. It will show up in the films they produce, in the themes they want to pursue in their advertising and public relations classes, in the stories they want to do in their journalism classes. And then those stories have to be produced in different ways, right? We have to adapt safe practices in the studio and safe practices in media production, just like the industry is. So smaller crews. We can't have a crew of 10 or 12 working, in close contact. Smaller crews. The students have to learn to work at a distance. We can't have 3 or 4 people huddling over one camera, right? In audio production, just like the music industry, you're not going to have the whole band in the studio at one time. You've got to space things out and use technology to assemble performances later. We're going to be doing the same thing. And this is probably going to be with us for a while. And so the things we have to do to adapt are not compromises. They're creative solutions to important challenges. And the skills that the students are learning in doing that, in meeting that challenge, are skills that they're going to be using in the workplace, in other media production places in the next few years.
The emerging technologies, this seems to give an edge to our students, yes?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a part of my work as a scholar. I'm a historian of media, and so I'm very interested in periods of rapid social change, rapid changes in communication technologies, like the 1920s and the 1950s, and then in the digital era more recently. And when you have unusual and very pressing social conditions like we have right now with the coronavirus, we will see innovations in how people communicate, and innovations even in the aesthetics of communication, in what signs and symbols we use, and what counts as good work and what counts as beautiful. We will see some very interesting changes. We're already seeing interesting changes. And we'll find out in the next couple of years whether they're permanent changes or whether they were transitory. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. It's a good time to be an educator.
So talking about we will see if these are permanent or if they have long-lasting, effects. How long do you think, because things move so quickly, of course, how long do you think, when can we gauge that?
Well, as a historian, I think of 50 years as a short time. But but as a media scholar, we've learned that change can happen very, very rapidly. So yeah, I think in popular culture, you get pretty short cycles. One of the things I was thinking about back when we all went home back in March, and we were all working from home and locked up in our houses. In the late 60s, early 70s, there was a kind of back to nature movement. And so, we saw singer-songwriters, we saw, simpler, smaller themes in popular culture, simpler music, quieter music, changes in what kind of novels were bestsellers. And, to the extent the pandemic pushes us to smaller groups and more family-based activities and outdoor activities rather than indoor activities, and cities start to feel like places of contagion, we may see a similar kind of back to nature movement. But in popular culture, 2 or 3 years is a big cycle, right? So you know, for a while on journalism, the reporting from your phone and that vertical perspective that a telephone camera gives you became a sort of sign of authenticity. And we would see it show up in advertising where they were trying to have that aura of authenticity. That might last a while, but it could well be that once they have access to their regular media equipment again, the cell phone video is going to get old, and we'll tolerate the bad audio of a Zoom call or a Skype meeting for a while, but when we have other options, bad audio isn't going to sound good.
Exactly, giving the cultural context. Those are very important in a conversation like this. I want us to go back, when we were ushered out of the buildings and into our homes. There had to be some hand holding at those moments.
Yeah, it was a bit of a wild experience. I mean, I left. Was the last one out of the building, and I left with great sadness. It felt sad to me. I was abandoning the ship, but we all needed, the sort of physical requirements dominated for the first few weeks. Everybody who had a desktop computer at their office suddenly needed a laptop. I mean, the university had to buy 200 some new laptops. Well, everybody else was trying to buy laptops at the same time, Web cameras were all of a sudden in short supply. Headsets were in short supply, So people needed all of this equipment, and there were a lot of IT challenges to sending people home and maintaining their access to computer systems and software and databases that are normally only available in the university's local hardwired network. So those kind of requirements dominated for the first week or two. But once we were home and had time to start working, it started feeling really strange. And so there was a lot of reaching out to each other, Zoom cocktail parties and Zoom coffee hours, and, a real attempt. People felt a need, and that need gives rise to activity, and so people were reaching out to each other and connecting much more than normal. But we also found, for some of our students, it was even more isolating. Students needed to leave the dorms, and not every student had some place to go. International students couldn't necessarily get home. Other students had very pressing financial circumstances, and so we had to find safe shelter for some students. We kept some students on campus, but the food service was shut down, and so other arrangements had to be made. And then every student was going home to a place that had a computer they could use and reliable broadband internet. Many of our students are from modest economic backgrounds. Webster, we pride ourselves on serving those students. One of the ways we serve them is providing access to computers and broadband internet here on campus. And when those students had to go home, they lost that service. And so, again, we created systems to loan equipment. We even were loaning hotspots so that they could access internet through a cell network, but still they had to have their own cell network. So it was difficult, and it's stressful. And and we've all seen statistics on the stress that the average American is feeling.
There was hand holding, but I think they felt confident with the measures that the university was taking and that the school was taking. So my hat's off.
What made that work, the pivot of moving all the classes to remote instruction, the only way that could work was with faculty and students working together to try to make it work, right? If everybody's focused on, we don't have any choice, we have to make this work. And I was enormously impressed and very grateful for the creativity and the flexibility and the community spirit of faculty and students working together. Students were teaching faculty new tricks to do, to work online and to be more interactive and make the class more interactive even at a distance. And everybody was adapting. What's one of the crucial things is to keep that live experience going. And so if a class normally met on Tuesday and Thursday at 10 o'clock or on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 o'clock, you still had those video sessions at Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 o'clock so that everybody saw each other face to face in the same class meeting times. And that's remote instruction. It's different from a fully online class is all typing. A fully online class is completely asynchronic. Everybody logs on their own schedule. But when we went remote, we used video so that everybody still has a face-to-face experience on a regular class meeting schedule.
Yeah, and the other thing that I should comment on is the goals and objectives were met for every class.
Yes.
That's something to be proud of.
Yeah.
in the face of adversity. So now, in the face of adversity, I guess this is adversity, and yet it's a conversation that will have great impact as we go into the future. And that's this whole discussion about race and institutional racism and how a school of communications, for instance, talks about that with its students, because they're going to be out there communicating. They may need to use different language, and if you would comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
A school of communication needs to be at the very center of that conversation, and we need to be leaders in diversity and inclusion. And inclusion is crucial. The goal is to build a diverse community where people of all backgrounds, all ethnicities, nationalities, economic statuses, people that come from all over the place, political spectrum, religions, come together and live and work together in an inclusive community where the differences between us are values. The differences between us are what make us valuable to each other. Communication cannot happen without differences. It's when I have information or a story or an idea to share. It's when you have a perspective that's different from mine. You have something I can learn. That's when communication happens, and that's when creativity happens. And so it's crucial that a school of communication be a place where people of all backgrounds, people of all kinds of difference, any nameable difference, different career goals, different ways of thinking, different ways of seeing the world, are brought together, and we live and work together in an inclusive community. And we learn to see differences as interesting and important and attractive and valuable. And then our contribution to the media industry and to our society in a larger sense is we're producing more diverse storytellers. We're producing more informed future journalists who can take more perspectives and understand more different points of view. And so perspective taking, the ability to imagine oneself in the other's place, the ability to see the world the way somebody else sees, That's a basic communication skill. How can I adapt to an audience if I don't have a highly developed musculature for empathy and imagination? These are communication skills, and we're not a good
Those are
school.
sensibilities.
Yeah, we're not a good school of communication if we are not building a diverse community and building inclusion.
Mhm. But we're also talking about developing certain sensibilities over time.
Right.
And that comes really from a culture. And different schools have different cultures, certainly.
We've been working for a long time here at Webster and in the School of Communications in particular to to build as diverse a school as we can. And so our percentage African American is higher than the larger metro area percentage. Um, we have procedures built into faculty searches and faculty hiring and staff hiring. We have procedures built in to make sure that we are attracting diverse candidates and that we are considering diverse candidates and hiring diversely whenever possible. And and we're building that community, and that's the first step. Then, right, people have to be valued in all of their aspects, and their diversity has to be an important part of how we operate as a community. And so these are all things for young people to learn, and we're a learning community.
You know, the School of Communications reaches out to Tashkent, to Leiden. If you could speak to that in this time, how has your communication, what have you been doing maybe differently?
Yeah, well, one of the ironies for us in the middle of a pandemic is while we position ourselves as an international school of communications, we have students and faculty and curriculum in Vienna and Geneva and Leiden and Accra and in Tashkent. Um, we're all under travel bans, and so we cannot go visit those places like we normally do. Part of how we operate as an international school of communication is to promote student travel and faculty travel and staff travel so that people have real on the ground international experiences, and so we can get to know each other across all of our different campuses. And so we bring international experience home. And so even our St. Louis students, not all of them, 30% or more do have a study abroad experience, but not all of them can do that. But nevertheless, they're sitting in classes with students who have studied abroad. They're with faculty members who have been abroad, and so on. And so, but right now we're under travel ban. Americans in particular, sadly, we're in a hot spot worldwide, and so we are not wanted in most of those countries at the moment. So, again, we have to use video conferencing and telephone calls and lots of emails and all of the other technologies that are available to us.
I'd love to hear any other perspectives you would like to share with us before I end our conversation.
Well, I would just reiterate that while this is a stressful time, it's a difficult moment for the whole world. We are lucky here in America and lucky in St. Louis and lucky at Webster University to be facing this adversity with a lot of resources. And not all of us, not everyone in our community has the same resources. Hunger has increased, joblessness has increased, homelessness has increased. And no matter how stressed we might feel, there are others in our community that have it worse. And so we have to recognize that luck, and we have to use those resources to stand up and be leaders and be generous and be helpful wherever we can be.
certainly you've demonstrated the ability to pivot, to be nimble, and we're faced with so much right now. I am hopeful that our school continues in such a positive way, embracing change, which is really very important ability to an asset to have to grasp that change. But I appreciate your time, Dean Eric. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Thank you for the press club.
You're welcome.